My name is George Lober, and this is Writing Winning Arguments from Offense and Defense. So one of the things I've learned since I've been associated with this school is everybody is much more comfortable if we have an agenda. So here's my agenda. We're going to review a little persuasive argument writing theory. Very little, I might add, but I'm just going to introduce it to you. We're going to review 3 questions every writer should ask at the beginning of every paper here at the postgraduate school. I'm going to review some mistakes that I want you to avoid in writing effective arguments. These will include a lot of fallacies. We're going to review a couple arguments, and I'm going to give you a couple arguments, very short arguments, have you read them and analyze them. And then if we have time, and I'm hoping we'll have time, I'm going to give you a chance to draft an argument, all right, and just kind of sketch it out as you would present it. So that's where we're going. Any questions on that in any way, by anybody at all? All right. Next question, is there anything you came here today that you wanted to know that is not included in that? In any way? Okay, I'll take that as a no. All right, so first, talking about arguments. What do we mean by persuasive arguments, persuasive theory? So I'm going to start by giving you an argument to read. Would you guys do me a favor and pass those back? That'd be awesome. Okay, what I want you to do, if you'll take the first page and look at the directions, and for those of you who are watching this video, I'll tell you the story. What this is on the first page is a letter written by a former student here at the Naval Postgraduate School. And what the story is, very simply, that student took his family around 6 p.m. on an evening a few years back to a cafe that at the time happened to be relatively empty, but he had heard a lot of good things about. Kind of very friendly, hip, kind of counterculture place with some good food, some good music. Early in the evening, took his wife and children there. They were hoping to get kind of a quick meal, maybe enjoy some of the ambiance. And as you will discover, if you were to read the letter, they waited and waited and waited, and they never got served. And it's not like the place was extremely busy because it was largely empty. In fact, there was staff playing with the computers, staff walking around. Nobody ever even acknowledged that they were there. Nobody paid any attention to them at all. So eventually, they got tired of waiting. They got up. They left. He felt compelled at that point in time to write the owner a letter. And what he did was he wrote the owner the letter expressing his disappointment at the lack of service, matter of fact, the non-service that they received. And he closed by saying, prior to this experience, my wife and I had even talked about coming back to check out the advertised music on Tuesday and Friday nights. So not only did the horrible service kill any likelihood I return, it also filled me with an obligation to let my friends know my experience with your cafe. Hopefully I can find some websites that will let me rate your cafe in order to prevent others from having to receive such poor customer treatment. Now admittedly, the student played the Yelp card. Okay, I will now go online and rate this badly. The owner then felt compelled to write back. What you have before you, of course, is the owner's response. All right. So for those of you watching this video, I'll read it to you very quickly. Dear, and it was my student, thanks for giving us a shot. Too bad we disappointed you. Don't worry, there are plenty of websites to vent your emotions on. You appear to have some unresolved anger issues and other hidden agendas that need to be spread. Hope you feel better once you do. As for our cafe, the non-existent service you received, you are clearly speaking as someone who either has no experience owning a business or otherwise have no sympathy for those who do. If you had any experience whatsoever, you would know that no one who embarks on such a project does so without the intention of failing, upsetting customers, and ultimately losing their financial investment. Small business owners are a tightly knit family of kindred spirits. Not everyone can take on the level of stress associated with running their own business. Sometimes we succeed, and sometimes due to a variety of factors we don't. More importantly, we are all doing our best to get a relatively new cafe business in a very out-of-the-way area up and running. We have a staff of extremely dedicated young people who are all giving their absolute best because they depend upon this job to make a living, because they believe in what we're trying to accomplish, and because they would prefer to work for a struggling mom and pop operation instead of a faceless corporate monster? Are we experiencing some problems? Of course we are, but no one is intentionally trying to be rude or unprofessional. We are simply making mistakes. On the other hand, you and your overstated obligation to let your friends know, quote unquote, are being intentionally malicious and vengeful. As for the level of your anger, it simply isn't called for. If you want to pretend that your unfortunate experience the other day is the most important thing in the world, I just can't help you. My advice to you is to put things in perspective. Seriously, man, it's just a cafe. Lighten up. So have a good 2008. I hope whatever you do for a living is going well for you. I hope you and your family are well and happy and healthy and successful. And I hope you're not experiencing the same business difficulties we are. All right, everybody got that? Now, really simply, don't tell me, tell each other. All right, pick a partner. That means you two, you two, you two, you two. How magically that works out. Pick a partner and tell each other whether you think the owner's response was in fact an effective argument that addressed my students' concerns. I'll give you about a minute. Go. All right, we there? Yeah. All right, really quickly. Levi, you're the student. Are you happy with the owner's response?
I would be. I don't think there was any apology for what they're both acknowledging as poor service.
All right. Is it Genevieve?
Yeah.
Are you happy?
Were these both posted on Yelp?
No, neither one was
These
posted
were
on
just-
Yelp. Yeah,
Oh, they were private?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, they definitely breezed over the fact that the person had experienced.
Poor service. Right, right. All right, Steve, we agree?
Agreed.
Okay. All right, we're going to come back to this. All right, so this would be an example of a non-effective argument. We're going to come back to this in just a few minutes and we'll talk about why. All right, so here at the Naval Postgraduate School, you know, what do we mean by a good, effective argument persuasive theory? So here's a very little argument theory, okay? So most academic papers, when we talk about an academic persuasive paper, many of the papers, depending upon the department you're in, many of the papers you're going to write are going to require you to, in fact, advocate for a position, you know, support one position or another, argue for one thing or another. In academic writing, we call those argument or persuasive papers, all right? So almost all argument papers, first of all, have an engaging introduction. If you were one of the ones at the SGL yesterday, you heard Professor Shore say that engaging introduction is really critical, all right? So they all feature an engaging introduction that serves two purposes, kind of offers a little relevancy, provides any needed history. I'm going to keep coming back to those two, by the way. And it offers a central point. Now, in argument theory, that is known as a claim, all right? In writing, that's known as your thesis statement. So as Professor Shore, if you're at the SGL yesterday, he was talking about how all arguments have to have a thesis. That's simply the main point. The main point of your argument. That's your thesis statement. Okay? All good arguments have, in fact, support for that central point. Now, in academic theory, sometimes people call those the grounds. What are the grounds for that point you're making? But in terms of writing, as writers, we just want to know what's the reasons, what's the evidence, what's the support for that you're backing that position up. All right. And then they have, argument theory has something called a warrant, all right? And what that simply means is that's the reasons why the support that you're providing is relevant. So, for example, all right, I'll give you an example of how this works. As it says here, as an unofficial holiday, Halloween has drifted widely from its original Celtic or Christian intent to honor, quote, and remember the dead, including saints and martyrs and faithful departed believers. I quoted that. That's a quote. And now an annual celebration of costumes, fun, and revelry. Halloween is, quote, the fourth most popular spending holiday in the United States. According to the International Business Times, a new publication with international readership of 29 million. Okay, that's actually true. And in fact, I happen to know that Americans spend $1.28 billion on Halloween candy. $1.28 billion. That's unbelievable. Shocking. Okay. All right, so how does this work in argument theory? All right, here you go. In argument theory, I did put it in there. In argument theory, all right, the beginning part, an unofficial holiday, Halloween has drifted widely from its original Celtic origins. That's my claim. That's the point, all right? Now I'm going to back that up with statistics. Now an annual celebration of costumes, and I included the quote here about 2.8 billion in candy. Those are my grounds. And then I'm backing that up by saying, according to the International Business Company, which in fact, when I say they have an international readership of 29 million, that's called the Warren. So we okay so far? So it's like you have a claim, grounds, warrant. That's academic argument theory. All right, this is writing reality. All right, writing reality says this is a classic old way to write an effective argument. That is to say, you make an assertion, as I did here, Halloween's drifted from its intent. All right, you back up that assertion with support. Why do you say that? What makes you think that? I offer some statistics. And then I basically tell you why those statistics and that source is relevant. This is a time-tested way to, in fact, go about writing and presenting an argument. Make an assertion, back it up, if need be, and if need be, then explain why the relevancy of that support that you just offered. All right, that's a classic old way of writing an effective argument. Claim, make your thesis, make a point, an assertion, back it up, and then if need be, explain the relevance of that. All right, are we okay on that so far? Any questions? Any questions so far in any way? All right, okay, so a good argument also offers an acknowledgement of a counter-argument. So when you're writing an argument, you also want to take some time, if it's going to be a good, effective academic argument, you want to take some time to, in fact, acknowledge the counter-argument, the other side. In doing that, you don't, of course, want to give them equal weight because you're trying to win the argument. But you do at least want to say, okay, I get where they're coming from. I understand why they think the way they do. I understand some of their reasons and evidence. But basically, you also want to then say, but here's why I think they're off base. Here's why I think they're wrong. If you don't include a counter-argument when you're presenting an argument in a paper, you always run the risk of your professor saying, yeah, you made a good argument, but you ducked that point. You ducked that issue. So you always, if you can, want to acknowledge the counter-argument, indicate that you understand it, and then if possible, dismiss it. And then you want to offer a summarizing, convincing conclusion. All right? So one tip here. I always teach students in my class is, in fact, never to include anything in the conclusion that you haven't included in the body of your paper. All right? Never put anything in the conclusion that you haven't included in the body of your paper. All right? So it's a good, safe rule to follow. All right. So in summary, here's basically the guidelines. This is your checklist if you want to write a good, effective argument paper. You want to write an engaging introduction. You want to write a central claim or thesis statement. All right? You want to provide some evidence for that. That's going to be many paragraphs of here's why you back that up. You want to, in fact, offer an acknowledgement of the counter-argument, and you want to offer a summarizing conclusion. In addition to that, you also want to offer any history of the issue if it's needed. All right? If I'm not sure that my reader is going to be up to date, let's say on Ebola, then I may need to, in fact, include some history on that, all right, in my argument, just to get them up to speed. I also want to make sure that why that's relevant. All right, why should I care about something that's happening in Africa? Why is that significant? All right, so I want to try to establish relevance with my reader. When I do that, what I'm really trying to say is, here's why you should take 20 minutes of your life to read this. This is interesting. You should check this out. All right? And if I'm going to be using any terms that I want to use in my paper, I need to, in fact, offer a definition of those kind of up front. Again, if you remember, Professor Shore was talking about his latest book, and I think he was, if you were at the SGL, and you didn't have to be if you're not in the new cohort, he mentioned something about his new book is on strategic empathy. I didn't know what that was. Nobody else did. but because Professor Shore made it up, but now he gets to define it and how he's going to use it in the book. So if you're using terms, if I'm going to be using success, tactical success, or strategic significance, and it's a term that you think your reader may not be familiar with, you want to offer a definition of that up front. Okay? So those are all the elements typically that would go into an effective academic paper. Right? Any questions on those so far in any way? Any way at all? Yes?
Do you recommend always introducing or defining a term at least the first time you use it, regardless of whether or not you think that your audience is going to understand it?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt.
Okay.
I do not think it's going to hurt. Oh, one thing I want to mention. Thank you. Good question. One thing I want to mention. Professor Shore, and again, I'm just coming back because yesterday we had the SGL for the new cohort. Typically, your thesis is something that you're going to want to be able to state. Anytime you write a good argument paper, I should be able to look at you and say, or what's your point? And you should be able to tell me the point of your paper in one sentence or two. Right? And that doesn't mean that's the essence of what's the essence of what you're trying to say. All right? And you should be able to boil that down to one sentence or two. Professor Shore is pretty tough. He always recommends 8 words or less. I'm a little more liberal than Professor Shore, so I say one sentence or two. All right? Any questions? Are we okay so far? Okay. All right. Faisal.
Can you go to the slide?
I certainly can. I can go right over here and hit the backspace button, and lo and behold, there we are.
The central claim, does it need to be the topic of your thesis or no?
The central claim, yes. Think of it as the central claim is the main point that you are trying to make in your paper. All right? So if my paper, all right, is on the topic of nuclear proliferation in Southeast Asia, but my point is that it needs to be controlled or regulated or something. All right, it's inevitable. My point is it's inevitable, but it needs to be regulated. That would be my thesis. All right. So your central claim or thesis is the central point within your paper that you are making about the assigned topic. Did I explain that okay? You sure? Okay. All right. All right, here we go. All right, as writers, let me break this down for you here, since you're going to be writers and you're going to have to write a lot of papers. All right. Here's are 3 questions I always teach in every workshop. 3 questions you need to ask yourself as a writer. All right. First one, of course, is who am I writing to? Now, I want you to know, as an English teacher, I'm willing to admit that's grammatically incorrect. Technically, it should be to whom am I writing, but nobody talks that way that I hang out with. All right. So it's who am I writing to? All right, that's the first question I need to ask. In writing, we would call that your audience. But you just got to figure out, who am I writing to? All right, who's the audience? Who's my reader? All right, what am I trying to say? All right, what am I trying to say in this paper? Hopefully that's clear. All right, and what's the best way to present it? 3 questions you should ask yourself before you sit down and start to crank something out. All right, before you actually, as your ideas are formulating, before you sit down and start to really put it together, you should ask yourself those 3 questions. To whom am I writing? What am I trying to say? What's the best way to present it? So when we talk about who am I writing to, I ask myself these questions. What does my audience already know? What do they need to know to follow my thinking? All right. Which again is another way of saying that I may need to give them some history. If I'm going to give them, get them up to speed on what I'm talking about, I need to establish relevance, why they should spend 20 minutes of their life reading my paper, and I want to define any terms. All right. So I'll just tell you how I do it. How I do it when I'm writing a paper, I've had to write a few recently. I imagine that my reader, I'm just going to tell you this, I know you're going to laugh. I imagine my reader as a stranger, a friendly stranger from New Jersey that I meet in an airport bar. This is somebody who is reasonably intelligent, reasonably friendly. We're stuck here for about an hour and a half or 2 hours, then we're going to go our separate ways. Just interested in, killing a beer and some time, and he's interested in what I have to say on a topic, but I don't know how much he knows, so I got to get him up to speed. All right? He's reasonably bright, reasonably articulate, but I don't assume that he's completely familiar with my topic. That's who I typically write to, my friendly stranger from New Jersey in the airport bar. All right? So, that having been said, when I say, what am I trying to say, I ask myself, what's my central point? All right, what's the one idea I am trying to argue? And again, as you see right here, I say this needs to be said in one short sentence, maybe two. What am I trying to say? All right, you need to be able to know that as a writer. And then I ask myself, what's the best way to present my central idea? So that gets into the question of how do I arrange my evidence, my support? All right, does my support, does it follow it logically? Do all my reasons and support follow each other logically? Are they well connected so that they flow from one point to the other? That's when I have to ask those questions before I sit down to put my paper together. Believe it or not, I actually kind of sketch all that out in my head. Okay, where do I want to go? What do I want to say? I want to bring in this support, these reasons, then I'm going to develop that, then here, then there. And I kind of sketch, brainstorm, graph it out before I ever sit down to write. All right, and it's all rough. It's all pencil scratches on paper. It doesn't look like anything, but it's a map that I can follow as I start to put it together. Okay? So in terms of like, do my ideas follow each other? This is a very simple exercise. You should all get this. Okay? Here we go. I have plans for my wife's birthday. All right? I really do. All right? So here's the deal. As it says, I've bought her a present and I will give it to her at dinner. I've ordered flowers to be delivered to our house. I have bought 2 birthday cards I'll leave on her pillow before I go to work. I'm going to take her to her favorite restaurant for dinner. I'm going to take her to her favorite bar for a drink before dinner. I'm going to bring her coffee in bed in the morning before the day starts. Those are all the things I'm going to do for my wife. All right. I've been married a long time. I've got a large expectations here. You know, the bar's high. So, I would submit to you this is not a well-written paragraph. All right. So, in 30 seconds, I want you to tell each other what you think is wrong with it. Go. Okay. All right. Time. We all got it. Okay. All right. Answer is?
It's not the order that it's going to be either done in or was done.
Yeah, it's like I just threw down a list. All right, so here you go. Ready? All right. Here, in fact, you have the 6 things I'm going to do for my wife. Now, with your partner, I'll give you another 30 seconds to put these in order. Go. Do me a favor, sign in. That'd be awesome. Thanks. All right, ready? Here you go. How do we do? We nailed it, right? All right, now as simple as this is, hopefully it illustrates the point. It's the same premise when you're writing an argument paper. You want to put things in an order that they flow, that your ideas connect. They either move logically and sequentially from one idea in your paper to the next. All right, so there should be that's what we call in writing, we call that a flow. So absolutely you want your ideas to flow. All right, any question on that in any possible way? Yes?
Could you also make the title the topic?
I don't know, I gotta go back, let me see.
Well, just so if we were scanning paragraphs, that would be the first sentence, and then we know what the paragraph is.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, good point. Yes, I could, I would do that. Right, that's totally true.
Can you restate that?
Sure, I'll go back again. I love this technology. Okay, yeah, the back button, yeah. Yeah, it works. All right, she was suggesting that if it were to be a real, true, honest-to-God paragraph, that the title up there would in fact be the topic sentence. I said, yes, she's absolutely right. All right. It's one of our fine young writing coaches here who picked that up. All right, there you go. All right. Okay. All right, so here you go, mistakes. These are fallacies, all right? Fallacies are mistakes in logic that oftentimes writers use when they are trying to, in fact, manipulate an argument, all right? These are all the shortcuts, the low blows, you know, the punches in the clinch, the cheap shots, all right, that writers take. You do not want to use these in your arguments here at the Naval Postgraduate School. And these are just some. There's many, many more. But I'll walk you through a few of these right away, all right? So we have an ad hominem fallacy. An ad hominem fallacy, if you're not familiar with it, is where you attack someone's character as opposed to the ideas that they're presenting, all right? So the classic example is, of course, you'd think that she's a woman, all right? Dismissing the idea because of her gender, all right? Or that's exactly the sort of suggestion I'd expect from a engineer, a Marine, you know, a SWO, whatever, all right? Then again, what we're saying here is you're attacking the person and not the idea. And to avoid this fallacy, what you need to do in writing an argument or a defensive or offensive argument is you need to attack the idea regardless of the person presenting it. Does that make sense? You want to focus on the idea, not the person, all right? So keep in mind, I'll just let you know now, politics, since we're coming up on an election right here, politics is all about ad hominem, all right? Politics should be about the issues, all right? Okay. All right, don't beg the question. Begging the question is when you front load a premise in your argument that you really don't want to have to address. So anytime you say, since we can agree that all men are, all right, insert adjective, all right, that begs the question. It's like, are they really that way? Or, given that the school needs us all to graduate, and that the premise, of course, is the school needs us all to graduate, is that true? All right, if not, that's begging the question. So oftentimes you'll see in an argument, when someone's presenting an argument, they kind of front load a premise they don't want to have to take the time to develop, all right? That typically is a mistake here at the Naval Postgraduate School. You want to avoid begging the question if you can. Don't make hasty generalizations. A hasty generalization occurs when you take a small sample and blow it up to be representative of a large group, all right? As in the statement, I dated a Norwegian woman once and I can tell you that they are all whatever, all right? One Norwegian woman does not, in fact, constitute a representative sample, all right? Or, this is totally true, I've been to Columbus, Georgia, and I have seen the South up close and personal, all right? If you've been to Columbus, Georgia, I know you may say that statement is absolutely spot on. However, you know, I can assure you, I suspect there's more to the South than Columbus, Georgia, but I don't know. I've only been to Columbus, Georgia. All right, so the advice here is don't assume a small group is representative of a greater group, all right? Don't confuse cause and effect. This is a common mistake that students make in their writing, all right? Evidenced by the statement, my great aunt met Hitler, 3 days later he invaded Poland, my great aunt is an evil influence. All right, one's great aunt may not have a lot of significance on that event, right? That's a cause and effect kind of error. Or, I drank 8 beers and tequila shots at the party and ate 1 bowl of Bob's chili. The next day I felt terrible. Bob's chili is to blame. All right. Seems to be dismissing a certain amount of consuming of alcohol there in that conclusion. All right. So don't assume a cause and effect, as I said, relationship without providing it. Avoid either or thinking. All right. This tends to be very, very dangerous at the postgraduate level because most things, at least in the department that I teach, involve shades of gray. All right. So, for example, either we outlaw unhealthy foods or America's doomed. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Okay? Or either America intervenes in Ukraine or the entire Central Asian region will be lost to Russia. Again, I think that's a bit of a stretch. There's probably all sorts of things in the middle that can occur without those two being necessarily the only two alternatives. This is also known as the fallacy of the excluded middle. So you just want to avoid this in your writing, all right? When you're this either or, few things are either or, all right? But as I say, tend to avoid them if you can, all right? Avoid appeals to pity, to unrelated authority, popularity, or pity. One of the things you want to do in an academic paper is always provide support. You just want the support to be related and relevant. So these statements like, according to Michael Jordan, you know, I don't know that Michael Jordan is an authority on everything he's attributed to be an authority on. You know, everyone with half a brain, that's an appeal to popularity. You know, few can appreciate the extraordinary pressures Lance Armstrong placed upon himself, that's an appeal to pity. All right, just want to avoid those in your writing, all right? So, false analogies. False analogies are in fact where people make false comparisons, all right? For example, you know, the obesity crisis in America is this day's version of the bubonic plague that swept Europe in the 14th century. I really think that's a false analogy. Pretty sure the plague was a whole lot worse than the obesity crisis in America. Pretty sure, all right? So that's a false analogy. Prejudicial language. All right, this is a big one that I encounter oftentimes here, all right? What you want to do is avoid those sorts of inflammatory, emotional-laden words that are deliberately, you know, an attempt to sort of align yourself with the readership or jerk an emotional response from your reader regarding a subject. So, for example, we take for granted that for all their ideological rigidity, Republicans have made a break with the recent past. Say what you will about the Tea Party's zealotry of the past 4 years, it has been a break with the lazy incompetence of the George W. Bush years. All right, I will give you exactly 20 seconds to identify, as you see it with your partner, at least one example of prejudicial language. And you may join those writing coaches. All right, ready? You're on. Go. Okay, let's talk. All right, can we agree that, for example, let's see here. Ideological rigidity, it's a little emotionally laden. Tea Party zealotry, zealotry is kind of an emotionally laden word. And then the lazy incompetence, that's definitely prejudicial language. Do we all get that? All right. All right, now, I'll give you a hint. I truly believe there are some, in fact, fallacies in the owner's response. Okay? So, let's see. Glinda, did you find any?
Yeah, the first one, the ad comment, he's attacking the student, not necessarily the problem.
Totally. Yeah. Unresolved anger issues, right? Yeah. That's a clear ad hominem. Absolutely. I totally agree. Faisal, any others?
Yeah, other hidden agendas.
Sorry?
It says unresolved anger issues and other hidden agendas.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Josh.
The either or, where it says, I mean, he specifically uses that language. You're clearly speaking as someone who either has no experience owning a business or otherwise have no sympathy for those who do.
Absolutely.
Leaving out the other options that maybe he just received bad service.
Yeah, totally. All right, any others? Yes.
False accusation. He says if you had any experience whatsoever, you would know, assuming that
Sure.
if anyone had experience, but he has no idea.
Well-
If he had experience, if he would know it.
Absolutely. What about we're just a mom and pop operation against the corporate faceless monster? Yeah, and that's an appeal to pity. That's the old appeal to pity, you know. Just mom and pop struggling against the corporate Starbucks. All right. All right, that's an appeal to pity. Yes. These were all written by, I might say, a rather prosperous business owner right here on the peninsula. So, all right. May not have graduated from MPS, but all right, already you can see why there are some problems with the way people present arguments. All right, so what I want to do is go back and look at a couple other arguments. So I indicated to you, these are all the things that a good persuasive argument paper will have, all right? It'll have all of these things. It's going to have an engaging introduction, a point, a thesis of some kind, all right? It's going to have grounds and support, lots of support, many paragraphs of why that point's developed needs to be accepted. It's going to offer maybe a counter-argument if possible. There's a good summary conclusion, some history, some idea that why this is important, any terms, all of that. So I'm going to give you two very, very short arguments, very simple arguments, okay? So I picked something, doesn't matter what school you are in, what department you're in, I'm fairly certain you are all familiar with social media. All right? Very good. All right, so here you go. Reality check. Your social media use may be putting you in danger. All right, written by the security office. No, just kidding. All right, do me a favor. Take a minute and just read it. It should read fairly quickly, so I'll give you about 3 minutes to go ahead and read this. All right, 3 questions. All right, 3 questions. If it's a good argument, all right, I should be able to identify the thesis. I should walk away saying, well, it's pretty well supported, and identify the support, okay? And I should, in fact, have an overall impression of how strong the argument is. It's a well-written, well-presented argument, or okay, but it could be a little better. I have some problems with it. All right. So, 3 questions. Everyone got that? What's the thesis? How well is it supported? How strong is the overall presentation of the argument? All right. Luis, you'll get to pick either team you choose. All right? Dudes or dudettes. It's entirely your call. All right. I will give you exactly 3 minutes to answer those questions with your partner. Go. All right, now here's the deal. I do not know old Audrey-Ann Aaron. She's not a friend of mine. She's not a family member. All right? So we can talk about her openly and freely. This is an academic class. All right, this is a workshop. So let's start here. Let's see. Luis, what do you think is the central point of this paper?
What she's trying to say is, if you're not careful, then your social media use may be putting you in danger.
I totally agree. Can we agree with that? That's pretty much it. If you're not careful, it could be putting you in danger. Yeah.
Taking the necessary precautions.
Yeah. So she sort of says that in the last line of the first paragraph, but she frames it as a question. And then she picks that point up again in the last line of the second paragraph, where she says, you know, social media sites are no different. So that's kind of the thesis. I totally agree. That's her thesis. All right. If you're not careful, you could be putting yourself in danger. All right. So, Glenda, what do you think of the, does she make a good case? She support that pretty well?
Yeah, she does. I mean, she throws figures out there, but where does she get these percentages?
Yeah, she does throw out some impressive figures. All right.
Where is it from?
78% of all burglars use social media, you know. crimes here of using social media, you want to know where they come from. Tell me why.
So I can see if it's relevant. I mean, if it comes from an FBI study, that's more relevant than just doing a random internet search.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I'm going to say something to you, and I don't want you to take offense at it, but you know what? You're starting to think like a professor. That's exactly how professors think. All right, where's your support coming from? Is it in fact relevant? Is it strong? I mean, on the surface, she offers a lot of interesting numbers. We have no idea where they come from, no idea whether they're coming from solid sources or not. 50% of sex crimes are involving minors, 33% of initiated sex crimes are social media. Interesting numbers. No idea where they come from. So again, that just weakens the argument. So in your opinion, Glenda, is this a strong argument? Strong argument paper? No. Josh? It's an opinion. Josh?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Number 2. We'll see if there's any difference. All right. Any difference. All right. Don't let the fact that it's from the New York Times throw you. Could, be rife with errors. The Times has been imperfect. Thank you. Once again, just take a couple of minutes to read it. And what I'm really interested in now is if you think this is better or worse and why. So take just a couple minutes. Okay, same drill. What's the thesis? And again, that should be like, what's the central point? Hopefully, if it's clear, we should be able to agree on it. All right, it should be clear. All right, what's the central point? In your opinion, how well is it supported? All right. How is it supported? How well is it supported? How strong is the presentation of the argument? And in your opinion, I'm not saying this is great, but in your opinion, is the presentation of this argument better or worse than the first one? Everyone got that? So I've added one question. All right, once again, I'll give you all of about 3 minutes. Go. Okay, let's talk. I love these moments. All right. Eileen, as in your opinion, as you read this, what do you think what's the central point?
I think he gets to it. He or she, sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of, we're not sure. Dr. Klaas.
Down in paragraph 5 about social media being an integral part of adolescence, and then it's kind of developed further, not until late on the next page, about how social media, it's important to understand social media because it is the key to how communication is changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that. Josh, you agree?
Yes.
Nicely said. All right. We all agree, so the idea is, the central point is that social media is it's here. It's kind of it's integral to the way adolescents are communicating, and it's affecting. Well, it's as the title says, it's more of a portal into adolescence than a pitfall. He thinks, he or she thinks. Dr. Klaas thinks. Agreed? Are we there? All right. Levi, you okay? You go with that? All right. So
The word portal, I'm trying to say it's something good.
I think it's more like I think he's using it as a lens. A lens in which you can understand kids, how they're communicating. All right. All right. Levi, in your opinion, is this better supported or worse than the previous one? Really, I'm Dr. Lober.
Right.
No, I'm not actually, but I just want to see. Yeah.
And then, medical, hospitals. So, I mean, without actually seeing the references, I think it's better supported than the first one.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Faisal, you okay with the support?
Because when he or she said that our job as parents is to help them manage all this wisely, it's giving us some kind of guidance.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying. He is trying to convince us or persuade us that all what we need is, although it has got something good and some bad part of online social media,
Mm-hmm.
but author says that we need to manage being parents.
Mm-hmm. 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 I agree. Steve, in your opinion, better written.
I want to say yes, mainly from just the flow, the structure, the logical sense that it made progressing through it. I think it was well written. I'm curious from the standpoint of the goal, when you're writing what your goal is. For instance, when I read the first one, I get more of a moving your reader to an action, to take action. I read the first one, it makes me want to go home, check my Facebook settings, actually do something.
Sure.
I read this one here and I say, my kid's going to grow up in a social world, okay. Like, it doesn't elicit an emotional response from me, whereas the first one does. But I understand the first one is less well supported, but the second one's more well supported, better structured, but doesn't really play to my emotions in.
Okay.
I think that's the point.
Hold on, one at a time. Our first Faisal, then Glenda. Go.
I would also like to say that author has also added some type of credibility when he has cited some doctor, a specialist in adolescent medicine at a university.
Right, he does identify his sources. At least we have some basis of thinking that this person's support is relevant. I totally agree. Glenda.
Just the emotion part, like the first one by Adrian, she wanted to be emotional about it.
Sure.
And the New York Times one, the author doesn't want you to be emotional. He wants you to accept that social media is part of their.
And ratchet it back. It's no different than the telephone. Pretty amazing. Yeah.
And maybe I guess the sense I got from reading it is that that there's a balanced view that you can take in addressing these, because I think the author said there are legitimate concerns with social media, but there are also legitimate opportunities. And when we see social media, we should see those two things in balance, and not necessarily what he says right there, that pitfall where some people are trying to say just only view this one aspect of social media, where he's saying take the full, widen your scope as to what the conclusions you're drawing or observations you're making when you're looking at social media.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Yes, sir.
The author also began by giving some kind of historical background.
Yes, nicely done, huh? But the whole thing about the telephone, I agree. All right. Here you go. All right. For the purposes of this exercise, we're going to pretend that everything on these sheets is absolutely true. Okay? In which case, I'm going to just give you all sorts of information. All right. I just gave you a sheet of cons against social media. Here's a sheet of pros. And to show you that you can do anything with statistics, here's the second sheet of pros and cons together. All right, so you'll notice, like on the sheet right here, some of the arguments. Social networking sites provide information faster than any other media. That's a pro. A con is that social media enables the spread of unreliable and false information. A pro is that law enforcement officials use social networking sites to catch and prosecute criminals. A con is that social networking sites lack privacy and expose users to government and corporate intrusions. A pro is that social networking sites help students do better at school. A con says students who are heavy social media users tend to have a lower grade. That's interesting. Social networking sites allow people to improve their relationships and make new friends, but the con is social networking sites can lead to stress and offline relationship problems. Social media helps empower women, but the con is that it helps social networking sites entice people to waste time at work. Social media sites help employers find employees and job seekers, and the con is that social media can harm job stability and employment prospects. So we got lots of arguments here. Not to mention that I've given you the pros here. Once again, you'll see that one claim is that students are doing better in school on social media. The other claim is, in fact, that students are spending too much time and getting lower grades using social media. So I only have 11 minutes left before I'm going to end this, so you have time to fill out your evaluations and questions. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, tops 5, all right, by my watch, all right? And what I want you to do is imagine you are being assigned to write an argumentative, persuasive paper dealing with the subject of whether or not, in your opinion, social media is producing more harm or more benefit for society. Is social media a source of greater harm or greater benefit for society? Everybody got that? I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. 2 things. 1, draft a thesis statement. All right. What would be the point of your paper? And 2, how do you think you would support it? What are some of the things, what are some of the reasons and support you would give? I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do both of those things. Ready? Go. Okay. All right, in this 5 minutes, what I ask you to do is something that you would normally spend, a couple of hours working out, all right? I realize that. I mean, you'd really think about what are you trying to say, what's the point. Once you kind of thought of where you want to say in your paper, you would then go to the library, you start pulling out references and looking up sources to sort of help you back that up. When you've got enough sources that you thought you could build a strong argument, you'd begin to structure it and put it together. And you kind of, plan what you wanted to say before you ever sat down to really crank it out. I get that. Nonetheless, I just want you to get through. This is what writers do. They've got to write, they're taking a position. They sort of have to first have a sense of what is it that I'm going to try to say, what's the argument that I want to make, how do I think I can best go about supporting it. All right, so you wrote it. So you're not writing it without sharing. That's part of writing. So I'll give you 1 minute to share with each other. Actually, I'll give you 2 minutes. I won't lie to you. I'm the ethics guy, so I can't lie. I'll give you 2 minutes to share with each other what you wrote. What's your thesis and how would you support it? Go. All right, in summary, when I am in fact reading an argument like I asked you to do earlier, we call that when you're sort of like, I'm attacking someone's argument, like the first 2 handouts I gave you, I would tend to ask these questions. All right, what's the central thesis or claim? How is it structured? Just what we went through. How is the support used to strengthen it? Is it valid? How fair is the argument presented? All the things we just talked about. All right, those are ways that if I am asked to respond to someone else's position on something, I tend to look at those questions, all right, and ask myself those questions. If I'm asked to write an argument, as I often am, I ask just what I just went over with you. What's my central thesis? What's the best way for me to structure it? What do I need to support it? And then I begin to develop my argument from there. Keeping in mind, and I don't want to dismiss Levi's point, at the Naval Postgraduate School, It's just not enough to say Dr. Jones said so. We really need the footnotes, the references, and all of that included in it. All right? All right, that concludes this workshop. It's sort of a kickoff for how to write effective arguments.